What's up, guys? Episode 4, Bourbon and Bass, breaking right now. It's been a few weeks, took a little hiatus, guys. We were up in Eufaula, Alabama for the Bassmaster Elite Series. So, hadn't done this in a couple of weeks, but I was really looking forward to dropping episode 4 because I got a good one for you. This week, bourbon part of Bourbon and Bass is going to be this little guy, Buffalo Trace. Many of you guys who do enjoy bourbons understand and know what Buffalo Trace is, but I'm going to give you a little history behind it, a little bit of American history with Buffalo Trace. You guys have driven through the middle parts of the country before, and you see signs say the Buffalo Trace, not necessarily the whiskey, but American history. Back in the day, when a lot of the U.S. was being settled and a lot of the prospectors were starting to make their way west through uncharted territories. If you could imagine, back then there was nothing was habitable, so they had to use certain routes to make their way west, and they would use ancient buffalo paths that were carved by buffalo back hundreds of years ago, when the buffalo roamed the plains and roamed the middle of the U.S. These settlers and prospectors would actually use these old ancient buffalo paths, and some of them still exist today. They're actually roads now, so you can actually go and drive on a road that was actually originally there, formed by buffaloes, and that's what a lot of the settlers and prospectors used to actually travel. So, and one of them in particular actually leads right to the Kentucky River, and that's where the Buffalo Trace Distillery is. Guys, Buffalo Trace Distillery has been making their bourbons the exact same way for over 200 years now, and a lot of the most popular bourbons and whiskeys out there actually come from the Buffalo Trace Distillery. Some of them may be familiar with you. Everything from Sazerac to Eagle Rare to Blanton's to the Van Winkles, Elmer T. Lee, E.H. Taylor, guys, all of those come from the Buffalo Trace Distillery. There's so many of them, and they're probably one of the most popular and some of the best bourbon makers out there. I don't know about around the country, but here in South Louisiana, if you order a Manhattan or an Old Fashioned or something, a lot of them are made with Buffalo Trace because it's probably the best for the money. I mean, you can get this for in the $20 to $30 range, depending on which size bottle you get. It'll last a while, and guys, it's smooth and has some sweetness, enough of that to drink it neat if you want it on the rocks or in a drink, and it's not going to break the bank. So that's why this Buffalo Trace may be one of the best for the money, and I love the history behind it. I love American history, and again, some of these paths that lead to the Buffalo Trace Distillery were actually there hundreds of years ago, and were actually created by the buffaloes that used to roam this place. So really cool story, Buffalo Trace, and they really make some good stuff. So if you're looking for something that you can mix a drink with, drink it however you want it, Buffalo Trace is one, but for the money might be one of the best bourbons, whiskeys out there. So really good one of my favorite. I keep a big bottle of this because this is what I'll sip on occasionally and make a drink with. That way I kind of stay away from the rare stuff and just let them sit on the shelf. But that's the bourbon part. The next part about this is I want to talk about a bait that got really popular a couple of years ago, and it's kind of started to go off now, is your Plopper style baits. I've talked to people who love this thing. I've talked to people that hate it. I've talked to people that said, man, I've thrown it, I just can't catch any fish on it. And you have to be very careful with a Plopper style bait. I like to call this, believe it or not, I call this the neighbor's dog. Yeah, you heard me right. I call this the neighbor's dog. Reason being is because it's kind of like a neighbor's dog. You'll love it occasionally, it'll love on you, but eventually it's going to crap in your yard. And for you tournament anglers out there, don't get too attached to it if you catch them in a practice and they don't eat it in a tournament, because this bait is very, very situational depending on conditions. And this is a bait that will really thrive with catching giant fish, especially this time of the year, all the way through the heat of the summer, through the fall. But it is very, very conditional. You need conditions. You need a really good chop. And guys, the summertime, when we start to get those pop-up afternoon thunderstorms, and you know what I'm talking about, and that will trigger fish. That is a lot of times when I put this bait in action. Rarely do I, especially this time of the year, am I fishing and I do not have, this is the 130, this is the Whopper Plopper, this is the 130, this is the big one, and this is the one that I have tied on, because when I pick this up, I am looking for that key one big fish. And that's when you need to throw this thing. Guys, a quick story, like 3 years ago, we were fishing a Bassmaster Open on Lake Chickamauga, and I had some grass flats, there were some fish in, but I knew there had to be some big ones in there. And both days of that tournament, we had pop-up thunderstorms like around noon to 2 o'clock. Every day they would roll around. And every day, both times when thunderstorms rolled in, I ran all the way back to my grass flats. I picked up this thing. The wind started blowing. The storms were rolling in, and I got like a 6-pound bite each day on this thing. Very situational, guys. I like to throw this thing on around submerged cover. What I mean submerged is grass that's underneath the surface, not sticking all out of the surface, maybe submerged wood, because guys, they will try to dismantle this thing when they hit it. They don't typically play around with this thing. Some of the most incredible topwater strikes I've ever seen have been on smallmouth on this thing. That's right, a 130, this big bait right here, smallmouth will try to absolutely break this thing in half. But again, guys, situational. This time of the year, inclement weather is when this thing can really catch a big one. Because this time of the year, especially in tournaments, the weights aren't high like they are in the springtime, and you're looking for that way to get that one big bite. And this bait right here can do it for you if you fish it in the right conditions. And guys, and I'll throw this thing on 65-pound braid. Don't play with this thing. You know, don't bring a tricycle to a NASCAR race when you're throwing a bait like this. Don't get out there with 10, 12, 14-pound fluorocarbon or monofilament and expect to have a really good catch-up ratio with this thing, because this thing, big bait, has big hooks on it, and you need to make sure you get hook point penetration in those fish when they eat it, because I try to end that fight as absolute soon as I possibly can, and I will get them into the boat. I actually horse the fish with this thing, because this bait is so big and heavy. When they come up and shake it, that fish has a lot of leverage to try to throw this thing. So I try to horse them to the boat, and I'll boat flip every one of them with this thing. I try to end the fight as quick as I possibly can. So guys, have it on your front deck. I don't care if you've caught them or not, but this bone color is universal, guys. Bone black. I mean, I don't know that it really matters, but the bone seems to be the best color unanimously through everybody that really throws it and catches them. But the 130, guys, it can catch a big one, and make sure you're throwing this thing when the weather starts getting bad, because that's when it can shine. But this plopper, it's been around a while now. Everybody's making knockoffs of it. This thing was actually originally created as a musky lure. And then it transitioned into bass, and people started realizing that, hey, it'll catch big fish too. Now they have different sizes. They have a 110, which is a medium version. I will throw sometime. And they have the 90, the little bitty one, you know, which is really good, and, you know, shad spawn, mayfly hatch, and, you know, marshy type areas and stuff like that when fish are just feeding. But I typically, I'm going to throw this thing, the big one, when I'm trying to get a big bite. Inclement weather, fish the conditions with this bait. It's kind of like a big swim bait, guys. This thing will hurt your feelings. I mean, it's just, you think they're going to eat it, and then all of a sudden they won't. You know, I don't typically pick this thing up, you know, until I'm actually looking for a big fish. You know, if I think I can get 5 bites a day on this thing, I will be throwing this thing all day, just simply because I know the size of the fish that this thing will catch. So be careful. Again, neighbor's dog, just think about that. Always have it on, keep throwing it, and throw it in the right conditions. And this thing right here can catch absolute giants for you. But I hope this helps, guys. I hope that gives you a little bit of confidence in the plopper, a little bit of American history behind Buffalo Trace and the Buffalo Trace Distillery, one of the best out there, one of my favorites as well. I always keep a bottle in the house and available. Won't break the bank, and if you're looking for something like that you can mix and do whatever with, Buffalo Trace is a good one. But guys, thank you guys for watching. Please drop a comment if there's something you want to talk about, whether it be fishing related, bourbon related. Send them my way, guys, and we'll see you guys next time for episode 5 next week of Bourbon and Bass. Thank you guys for watching. Later.